Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri. He is the chair of the National Leadership Council for the Reagan Institute. Senator, welcome. I want to talk to you about Bridge Colby, but first I want to read you a quote that I just saw during the break. Pete Hegseth at the NATO meeting today said, "We can talk about values all we want. Values are important, but you can't shoot values. You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches. There's no replacement for hard power. As much as we may not want to like the world we live in some cases, there's nothing like hard power." Good message for the Secretary of Defense to be sending?
Absolutely. And you know, the readiness and capabilities of America's armed forces are what give life and strength and time for the tools of soft power to work. I think it was George Kennan who said it's amazing how much more pleasant diplomacy is when you have a little hard power or a little armed force in the background. So it's the right statement for him to make, and I'm glad he's making it in that forum.
Now, Senator, Bridge Colby is a friend of the show. I've met him a few times. Not a good friend. He's not like Robert O'Brien or you or Mike Gallagher, but I think he knows his stuff. I think he is a very, very much China hawk, and that he will be a great Undersecretary of Defense. But there's an article in the Hill today taking shots at him, anonymous sources, allegedly an anonymous Republican senator. What do you make, A, of his qualifications, of B, anonymous sources taking pot shots at one of our guys?
Yeah. Bridge is brilliant, and he's going to be part of a team that is going to offer a lot of different viewpoints to the president. I mean, he's got Marco Rubio, he's got Waltz, he's got Ratliff, now he's got Tulsi Gabbard. He's going to have Bridge Colby. Bridge's book, which I imagine you've read, Strategy of Denial, is a really brilliant discussion of how we can.
I have not.
Oh, it's a great book. How we can. My gosh, I've read a book you haven't read.
Well, someone's got to promote it to me. You just did. Now, he's not much of a promoter of his own books, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he should have been on the show. I can cross something off my bucket list now, Hugh. I never thought I'd be able to say that. It's a really good book. I've had discussions with Bridge because one of the points I've made to Bridge is that China's ambitions are global. And so if we want to contest them effectively, we have to contest them in places like Latin America and Africa. I watched him on a panel with Mark Montgomery that Jerry Hendricks invited me to, I don't know, a few months ago. It was a really interesting discussion. He's going to get confirmed. Now, what I will say, you, is I think his hearing is going to be a very healthy and productive hearing. It's what the Senate ought to be doing is discussing some of these foreign policy issues, airing disagreements. But he's brilliant. He's going to serve the president well. And if there is a real attempt to undermine him anonymously, that's just something that shouldn't happen. People ought to come out and say what they think.
That's what I think. And you can oppose anyone you want, but talk to me about it. With Dick Durbin opposing Kash Patel, sure. I pay no attention. But if there's a Republican senator who's got a problem, I want to know what it is and why. Now, Mark Montgomery, the admiral, by coincidence, I had booked him early this morning after reading about the launch of a new Chinese carrier and the fifth-generation fighter, the J-35 that it carries. And we talked about submarines, and we talked for 3 segments about it. It's over at my YouTube channel. He also said, we don't agree on everything, but the guy is really smart. That's a summary, a paraphrase of what Admiral Montgomery said. Do you think there's anyone who's going to argue he's not qualified?
No, I don't know how they possibly can. And again, this is President Trump's style. He doesn't want everybody who works for him, either in foreign or domestic policy, to be telling him the same thing. I mean, I know enough about Donald Trump to know that if he started hearing just one point of view from everybody, he would seek out other views. He also, of course, has a number of contacts outside of the formal government that he's going to talk to. So, but look, Bridge gets an awful lot right. And I don't want to sound like I think he's some tremendously heterodox thinker, which would be okay. I don't think he's that way at all. And I think he's over at defense primarily because China is the pacing threat, as you know, and as you've discussed with Mark Montgomery in a lot of cases. And by the way, that aircraft carrier that you talked to Mark about, that shows what I was saying before. Their ambitions are global, and they're building an expeditionary military. They're going to have the power to conduct a war away from their shores in 10 or 15 years to protect their interests. And they're going to be able to deploy everywhere in the world within a couple of decades. So we obviously need to get moving.
The good news on that front, but that story was sent to me by a retired United States Marine Corps general who said China doesn't need to dominate every theater. They have to be competitive in every theater, and this is their step to be competitive in the carrier-based war theater. And it's a wake-up call. But the good news is the House Budget Committee has brought over the Freedom Caucus, and it's ambiguous. They say defense and the border is going to get $300 billion in the reconciliation package. And if that's even 50-50, I'm happy. I'd prefer to be 60-40 defense border. But what do you think of that?
I think it's about right. I mean, you know, you can analyze this out the kazoo, and people like Mark have and Jerry Hendricks have, or you can just, if you're familiar with the department and you've worked these issues a long time, you know that what we need is about a 3 to 5% real dollar increase every year, sustained out through what they call a fit-up, a 5-year defense plan. And it has to be reliable funding, and a whole lot of it's got to be devoted to the defense industrial base, and in particular, the shipyard industrial base. And now that Jerry Hendricks has gone inside at the National Security Council, we can expect that money to be spent wisely. So it sounds about right to me, Hugh. I mean, you know, again, we can argue on the margin about what the exact number ought to be, but it needs to be good, solid increases over a long period of time.
That's what the Admiral said this first hour. $40 billion increase every year for the rest of the Trump administration into the second administration that follows him would do a lot towards preparing us to make sure that we don't go from Cold War to hot war with China. 30 seconds, Jim. You agree with that? $40 billion a year for the next 8 years?
Yeah, I do. And people, I mean, you'd love to spend more. Reagan had bigger increases than that, but he had a healthy defense industrial base. I mean, there's no use appropriating money you can't spend. I mean,
exactly.
The submarines, for example. I mean, Congress wants to buy submarines, but we can't produce them. So we have to build that capability.
Jim Talent, follow him on X, Jim Talent. Listen to him on Dwayne's World.